Should you keep the house and divorce or should you just let it go? My name is Taylor Wins. I'm a divorce coach, Minnesota divorce attorney, and a divorced mom of four. And when I divorced my husband, I owned a house. And we actually got divorced two different times. And the first time that we got divorced, I kept the house. And the second time that we got divorced, he kept the house. And so I've been on both sides of the equation and can tell you a lot about how that went personally for me, but also how it's gone for my clients. So today we're actually going to have a conversation about the three big things you should be thinking about and consider if you want to decide whether or not you should keep the house in your divorce. So we're going to get to money. We're going to talk all about that. But first, I want to talk about the emotional weight of the home that you're living in right now. This was a major consideration for me when I got divorced the second time. I was just ready to move on and start fresh, even if that meant moving in with mom and dad, which is exactly what I did. Because at the time that I got divorced, I was self-employed, so I didn't have the proper documentation of my income or the longevity in my business to be able to refinance the house that we lived in and cash him out. I'm going to get to all of that here in just a minute. But you want to think about the emotional weight of the home. Are there a lot of really toxic memories in the home that you are ready to move on from and get away from? Are you having a reaction to leaving the home? Like, how can I leave this home? This is my kids' childhood home. This is where I brought them home from the hospital. This is where all their friends in the neighborhood live. They've always caught the bus from kindergarten forward at the bus stop, right down the street from our house. But all of those things are really important for you as you make considerations because it's going to help you decide whether or not fighting for the house is something you want to do. Because if you're fighting for the house just to fight for the house and you don't really want the house because it's emotionally not good for you, you've suffered trauma there or things to that effect, then maybe consider letting the house go. There are probably three big things that you want to think about when you think about the emotions behind whether or not you're going to keep this house. It's the attachment to the memories, to the time that your kids have spent there, to the things that you have there. Like, do you have this really great office that you really love that makes you feel really safe and warm and grounded, like having a space of your own in the house? And you don't want to let that go. Does the house provide for routine, for stability for the kids? Have you built certain things in the house around the children or around your life that are really unique to that specific house and you want to maintain them? I know families who have children who have special needs and they've built things in the house, like they've got swings from the ceiling, or they have places where they can do like somatics, and there's nooks and crannies for these types of things for the kids. And that's really important. And to move out and then go try to find something that would have that or to have to rebuild that would be a big hardship. So it's really important to those clients to keep the home. Same thing with like nooks and offices and personal spaces in people's homes that they have that they really enjoy, where starting over just doesn't feel like what they want to do with the house. Do you want to keep the house because you want to avoid more upheaval and change in your kids' lives? Say you're going to have the primary parenting time and the kids are going to be with you more than 50% of the time. So it's important to you to keep the home the same because that's where they've already grown up, where they've spent the majority of their lives, and now they're going to be spending the majority of the time post-divorce with you in this home. If that's the reality and that's important to you, then that is a consideration that you should think about. Or are you feeling like you should keep the house just to prove something? Because that might not be the best reason to keep the house. You can rebuild. You can start fresh. You can find stability and new routine elsewhere. Maybe you hate your house. Like, I hated my house. I didn't like the house. The house always smelled weird to me. Like, since we moved in, it was full of bad memories. I didn't like the layout. We had 2 bedrooms upstairs and 2 bedrooms downstairs with 4 kids, right? And so it wasn't like a good setup for us. So I decided the second time I was just going to let it go. Now, let's talk about the financial reality of keeping a house that you already live in versus buying a new house after divorce. So just because you keep the house that you live in does not mean that you get to keep all of the equity in the house. So if you live in a house that you had during the marriage, you contributed marital equity, marital income, marital funds to this house, and now you're going to keep it and your partner is going to leave the house, they're going to move out, move on, and they're going to find something else, they are still entitled to one half of the equity that is marital in the home. Marital equity is any money you paid down on the mortgage or any down payment that you put on the house that was marital funds. And so that's money that you earned while you were married, that those are resources that you got while you were married. That might be selling a previous marital home and rolling that money, that marital money, into a new home. All that's marital. Non-marital would be an inheritance that you got from your grandma. That's just for you. Money that you had prior to the marriage that you brought into the marriage and put down on the house or used to pay down the mortgage, that's non-marital. So let's just assume for the purposes of what we're talking about today that all of the equity in your house is marital. And then that would mean that all of that equity, say you have a $300,000 house, you owe $150,000 on the mortgage, and you're going to keep the house, you may need to cash your spouse out of that at $75,000 in liquid money, right? To make them whole from that equity when they leave the marriage. And so if you have to do that, the most typical way that that gets done is you would refinance the house on a cash out refinance, and you would get that money in cash and it would be paid to your ex-spouse. What the reality of that is that when you do a cash out refinance, it's going to raise the balance on the mortgage, which in and of itself will likely raise the payment or could raise the payment. And then you may have a new interest rate. So let's say you refinanced your house in 2020 and you have a 2.875 interest rate on a 30-year mortgage. If you have to now add $75,000 to the balance of the mortgage and get a higher interest rate, your payment could go up. That's not to say 100% of the time it will go up, because you might be stretching out like a really old mortgage back out over 30 years. So your payment could be synonymous, but who's to say, right? So it's really important that you're running these scenarios with a mortgage professional before you make decisions, so you don't set yourself up in a circumstance or situation where you can't afford to be the person that stays in the home. You might also think about the hidden costs of home ownership. If you've lived in a house for a long time and you're going to need in the next 2 years a new roof on the house, a new air conditioning unit, maybe a new furnace, well, now you're going to be responsible for all of that. Are you set up with your income by yourself, any child support that you get, and any spousal maintenance that you get, and then whatever your property settlement is in the divorce, to take on major expenses like that could creep up a couple years after the divorce is over? So that's a major consideration too. If you live in a really old house and all of this stuff might be coming down the pike, plus, now you are solely responsible for the maintenance, the upkeep, the snow removal, the lawn care, and the landscaping. Is this somewhere that you really want to live? So those are good considerations as well. And the third thing I want to talk about in your decision-making framework are the legal and the practical implications of being the person that stays in the home versus the person that leaves the home. We already kind of alluded to it in the finances, but are you going to be able to qualify for a refinance? That is number one. If you can't qualify, then decision made, more likely than not, right? You might be much better off just taking the cash and moving on into something else. Another consideration is, like, what if nobody can qualify for this cash out refinance? Is there any way you can both stay on the mortgage for a short period of time, 6 months, 1 year, maybe 2 years, so that somebody can refinance and cash the other person out and make that person whole, instead of both of you having to like sell the house and move on, if that's not what either of you wants? Because renting isn't always cheaper than ownership, even if you are going to have major expenses coming down the pike later, like we talked about with that furnace situation or the new roof. So you want to think about, are there like ways that you can finesse it and finagle it? Then you want to think about, as far as legal and practical considerations go, are there any implications on child support and spousal maintenance if you keep the house versus not keeping the house? Now, is there like a direct correlation between keeping the house and what you get in child support and spousal? No, but everything in divorce is kind of like this global settlement, right? And so can you use like keeping the house and paying out a little less equity as a bargaining chip so that the other person can maybe not pay you spousal maintenance? Or can you offset various things like, hey, I'll keep the house and I'll pay you $20,000 in equity instead of $75,000 in equity, but you'll get to keep your retirement. And so there are all of these considerations about how can you use the equity in the house and use other parts of the divorce settlement to come to a fair resolution for everybody that is the easiest outcome. Because if you have trouble refinancing to take out $75,000, but would qualify if you only had to take out $10,000 or $20,000, and in exchange for giving that person less, they get something else in return, like maybe they don't pay spousal or maybe they keep their retirement. That is a fair and equitable result for everybody involved and can really help both people achieve their goals in the divorce. Let's talk about some alternative options to the very traditional one person keeps the house, refinances it, pays out the other person who goes on their merry way. And one of those alternatives is just that the house gets sold and the proceeds get split equally. This is a good option for when neither person can afford to stay in the house by themselves. And so it gives both people the opportunity for a fresh start, where we just have a pile of cash and now we can like reset and figure out what our next steps are. Maybe that's renting short term. Maybe that's moving in with mom and dad. Maybe that's paying down debt so you can rebuild your financial life. But that is an option. Nobody has to keep the house in divorce. The other big alternative situation is we do sometimes see nesting. This is a combination of like, we're not sure who's going to own the house yet. And we also are going to try to ease this transition for our kids. And so we'll nest. What nesting is where the family stays living in the family home, and whoever has parenting time is in the home with the children during that time. So if I have parenting time on Monday and Tuesday I live at the house. And then if my ex has parenting time on Wednesday and Thursday he lives in the house, and maybe we alternate the weekends. The person who doesn't have parenting time would then go out and live somewhere else on their off-duty parenting time. This, for a lot of people, is living with mom and dad, friends and family, sharing an apartment or something with a roommate. And sometimes the parties themselves, this couple that's splitting up, will rent one studio or one bedroom apartment, and then they will share that space as well, and they'll go there when they don't have parenting time with the kids. Then this buys some time for the adults to figure out what are we going to do with this house, while also easing that transition of divorce for the kids. So just to kind of reiterate a lot of things that were already said, your decision-making framework for whether or not you should keep the house is threefold. 1, can I keep the house without stress? 2, am I keeping the house for the right reasons? And 3, does this home support my vision for the future, or am I kind of like stuck in the past if I stay living in this home? Make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you never miss any information from me about divorce, custody, and co-parenting. And then I just want to encourage you before I let you go that letting go of the house does not mean letting go of the idea that you'll ever have a real home. Home is wherever you make it. See you in the next one.